Welcome to Provisional Aspirations, a podcast exploring the psychology of religion, philosophy, and clinical mental health. I'm Jeffrey Wallace, author, religious trauma survivor, and graduate student pursuing a master's degree in counseling psychology. Join me as I indulge my academic interest in the human spiritual experience, a curiosity that I couldn't fully explore as a member of a high-demand religious group. But now I'm learning out loud, and it feels great. A few months ago, I was reading a book on Gestalt therapy, wherein the author, Fritz Perls, refers to the philosophical concept of the banality of evil. It wasn't the first time I'd heard the expression. It had always chilled me. Something about evil being common, ordinary, and ubiquitous always seemed too pessimistic of a worldview for me. But since Perls was challenging me to grow into my holistic self, I decided to follow my curiosity to the book Eichmann in Jerusalem, a report on the banality of evil, by Hannah Arendt, published in 1963. The book covers the trial of Adolf Eichmann, a Nazi official who was one of the main organizers of the Holocaust. The book caused a stir in the United States, not only because Arendt brought attention to the role that some prominent Jews in Germany inadvertently played in facilitating the Nazi mission, but also because she did not portray Eichmann as a monster. Arendt's book impresses upon the reader that there is nothing extraordinarily maniacal or brilliant that makes one evil. There was nothing extraordinarily maniacal or brilliant about Adolf Eichmann. He was boring, average, insignificant. This banality, combined with a few other psychosocial phenomena that are disturbingly common to the human experience, led to the unfathomable evil of the Holocaust. But this podcast episode isn't about that book. Instead, I'd like to focus on a collection of two small philosophical treatises by Arendt, released in a single volume called On Lying and Politics. My copy of On Lying and Politics actually includes two works by Arendt, one published in 1954, called Truth and Politics, and one published in 1971, in reaction to the leak of the Pentagon Papers, called Lying in Politics. Arendt's discussion of how facts, truths, lies, and opinions play different roles in the political and social sphere is what caught my attention the most. It's my lived experience, about which my readers are aware, with the use of indoctrination, religious propaganda, and control of information within the Jehovah's Witness community that makes me particularly interested in Arendt's commentary. I'm fascinated with the eerie power over cognition that's wielded by influential ruling bodies and social majorities, as is evidenced in the small microcosm of my upbringing. But over the last year, during which I neither wrote nor recorded, I came to the realization that many of my complaints about the psychosocial atmosphere of my obscure religious group are not all that particular to it. They are, well, banal. And Arendt's philosophical approach to facts, truths, lies, and opinions, while fascinating when applied to my old social environment in a high-demand religious group, of course, has its broader application in the sociopolitical sphere of the secular world, of which I am a part. By this I mean to say that while honoring my traumatic history and challenges with religious trauma syndrome, I wish to expand the realm of my curiosity in this new chapter of the podcast. I no longer actively worship with Jehovah's Witnesses. And my name's not Jeffrey Wallace, it's T.W. Moore. So with that, I'll tease your interest in the following discussion of the relative powers of fact, truth, opinion, and lie, with a quote from Arendt on page 47 of On Lying and Politics. It has frequently been noticed that the surest long-term result of brainwashing is a peculiar kind of cynicism, an absolute refusal to believe in the truth of anything, no matter how well this truth may be established. In other words, the result of a consistent and total substitution of lies for factual truth is not that the lies will now be accepted as truth, and the truth be defamed as lies, but that the sense by which we take our bearings in the real world, and the category of truth versus falsehood is among the mental means to this end, is being destroyed. Let's get into it. In On Lying in Politics, Hannah Arendt discusses the way facts, philosophical truths, deliberate lies, and opinions interact in the sociopolitical landscape. Let's discuss these one at a time, starting with fact. Arendt identifies that facts have a disrupting effect on both philosophical truth and political opinion. Factual truth often clashes with political opinion, disrupting a group's mission or desire for profit. As a result, Arendt says, facts can turn into secrets. This is one of the terrible realities that she identifies in the book The Banality of Evil, wherein facts, of which most Germans were very well aware regarding the genocidal efforts of the Nazi Party, became secrets that could not be discussed. This resulted in a social silence that worsened the situation. In On Lying in Politics, she puts it this way: the facts that I have in mind are publicly known, and yet the same public that knows them can successfully, and often spontaneously, taboo their public discussion and treat them as though they were what they are not, namely secrets. End quote. So while it would seem rational to rely on facts in open debate, the fact is politically vulnerable. She goes on, and I quote, "To the extent to which unwelcome factual truths are tolerated in free countries, they are often consciously or unconsciously transformed into opinions." End quote. Likely you've heard times when well-developed arguments based on factual truths are dismissed as just someone's opinion. And they very well may be just that. Arendt identifies this when she says about historical facts, and I quote, "Generations of historians and philosophers of history demonstrated the impossibility of ascertaining facts without interpretation, since they must first be picked out of a chaos of sheer happenings, and then be fitted into a story that could be told only in a certain perspective." End quote. Arendt identifies a caution here when depending on fact. She says that fact, and I quote, "seems often to suffer a similar fate when it is exposed to the marketplace, namely, to be countered not by lies and deliberate falsehoods, but by opinion." End quote. And finally, summing up the unfortunate destiny that facts may face, Arendt says, and I quote, "It is not difficult to imagine what the fate of factual truth would be if power interests, national or social, had the last say in these matters." Arendt's discussion of the tenuous fragility of fact is sobering, really, when it comes to the way we frame our worldview. Facts can not only be manipulated before they're presented to us, but they can be muted by either social or authoritarian power, rendering them impotent for any sort of useful influence. Let's move now to truth. Seeking truth seems like a noble enough pursuit, but Arendt identifies its weakness in relation to opinion. She puts it this way, and I quote, "Truthfulness has never been counted among the political virtues, because it has little indeed to contribute to the change of the world and of circumstances, which is among the most legitimate political activities." End quote. "Truth," she states, and I quote, "concerns man in his singularity. It is unpolitical by nature." End quote. That is to say that philosophical truth is fit for the individual thinker, but not for collective political or social use. She goes on to explain that truth, if accepted by the many, does not owe its success to its truthfulness, but to the power of the opinion of the many. Thus, opinion once again, just as it outweighed fact, outweighs truth. She goes on to use quite a jarring example of the blurred line between truth and opinion by quoting the Declaration of Independence. Thomas Jefferson begins with, "We hold these truths to be self-evident." Arendt italicizes "we hold" to show that it was the opinion that contributed to the weight of the words, and that they were actually not self-evident. She puts it this way, and I quote, "He conceded, albeit without becoming aware of it, that the statement, 'all men are created equal,' is not self-evident, but stands in need of agreement and consent. That equality, if it is to be politically relevant, is a matter of opinion and not the truth. That all men are created equal is not self-evident, nor can it be proved. We hold this opinion because freedom is possible only among equals, and we believe that the joys and gratifications of free company are to be preferred to the doubtful pleasure of holding dominion." End quote. So how can one even identify a truth? Arendt says that, and I quote, "The hallmark of factual truth is that its opposite is neither error nor illusion nor opinion, but the deliberate falsehood or lie." End quote. And that is to say that someone cannot argue with a lie, while opinions and truths can be argued. A lie can be identified by our ability to assert its direct opposite, the philosophical or factual truth. But I'll get to lies in a bit. Next is opinion. Arendt asserts that opinion is the opposite of truth. She says, and I quote, that opinion, and not truth, belongs among the indispensable prerequisites of all power, end quote. Since truth is, according to Arendt, for the person in solitude, one must rely on opinion for use in the political and social realm. Arendt presents an insightful formula about how to create a good political opinion. Since philosophical truth involves the person in solitude, the quality of a political opinion relies on its ability to take into account other people's opinions, what Arendt calls representative thinking. The political thinker does not sit and search for truth, as does the philosopher, but uses an enlarged mentality. In this, Arendt draws from the philosopher Immanuel Kant, to disinterestedly create an opinion that takes into account the viewpoint of others. This is not a matter of empathy or counting noses, as Arendt puts it, to find out how the majority feels, but rather a matter of imagination. Arendt says this on page 24. Even if I shun all company, or am completely isolated while forming an opinion, I am not simply together only with myself in the solitude of philosophical thought. I remain in this world of universal interdependence, where I can make myself the representative of everybody else. Of course, I can refuse to do this and form an opinion that takes only my own interest or the interests of the group to which I belong into account. Nothing, indeed, is more common, even among highly sophisticated people, than the blind obstinacy that becomes manifest in lack of imagination and failure to judge. But the very quality of an opinion, as of a judgment, depends on the degree of its impartiality. End quote. Arendt concedes that opinion can be disrupted by inconvenient facts or uncomfortable philosophical truths. But she reiterates that fact can be dismissed as opinion, and truth can be lied out of existence. Therefore, opinion is by far the most useful political and social tool. So what about lies in politics? Hannah Arendt's perspective is fascinating. She says that lies are essential in politics, and puts it this way, and I quote, "The liar is an actor by nature. He says what is not so because he wants things to be different from what they are. That is, he wants to change the world." End quote. Later she says, and I quote, "A characteristic of human action is that it always begins something new. We remove ourselves from where we physically are located and imagine that things might as well be different from what they actually are. In other words, the deliberate denial of factual truth, the ability to lie, and the capacity to change facts, the ability to act, are interconnected. They owe their existence to the same source, imagination." End quote. So basically, while, and I quote, "the mere telling of facts leads to no action whatever," end quote, a lie is politically useful because it seeks to create change by manipulating opinion, which is essentially the work of politics. As a result, then, the liar is always at an advantage to the truth-teller, because the liar is, as Arendt puts it, and I quote, "free to fashion his facts to fit the profit and pleasure, or even the mere expectations of his audience," end quote. Arendt concludes that he will be more persuasive than the truth-teller. One other significant observation from the second half of my volume of On Lying in Politics is the possibility of self-deception in the political liar. Arendt notes that the political and media messaging during the Vietnam War era managed only to convince the liars themselves of the official propaganda line regarding the rationale for the war. In the end, it seemed to Arendt that only the liars believed the story. She highlights the psychology of self-deception by saying that those who attempt to change reality, and I quote, "will be tempted to fit their reality, which after all was man-made to begin with, and thus could have been otherwise, into their theory," end quote. She says, "The self-deceived deceiver loses all contact with not only his audience, but also the real world," end quote. In the quagmire of organized lying, the deceiver loses grasp of the contingency to reality that once separated their opinion from it. They forget that their opinion, designed to change the world, was still contingent on reality catching up. The self-deceiver then, as Arendt puts it, disappears in an entirely defactualized world. Arendt's caution about self-deception is valuable. It theorizes a process for the loss of one's reality in political or social opinion, the contingency of opinion to deliberate philosophical contemplation of truth, and the scientist's meticulous loyalty to factual given reality, as Arendt puts it, can be overlooked in our overeagerness to act. People who act, Arendt says, will hardly have the natural scientist's patience to wait until theories and hypothetical explanations are verified or denied by facts. End quote. If all of this seems a bit hopeless, Arendt's thoughts at least have a way of unburdening one from the responsibility to stubbornly hold to one's truth, or even from the obsessive desire to get to the bottom of things, to find the truth. For me, of course, truth is an emotion-laden word. Jehovah's Witnesses colloquially refer to their organization, doctrine, and way of life as the truth. Children born to Jehovah's Witness parents are said to be raised in the truth. Dinner parties start with the icebreaker, "What brought you into the truth?" And my Jehovah's Witness family members shamefully tell my old community that I have left the truth. That aside, the quest for truth seems like a noble enough path. But Arendt's commentary certainly levies a moderating influence on the pursuit. It might be good for the life of the singular philosopher of scientist, but as Arendt puts it, it's not a good fit for life in the plural. Thanks for listening to Provisional Aspirations. It feels great to be back on the mic. I'll be back with another episode soon.